still in Texas, and in this travelogue we're going to look at a little bit of ranching and cotton growing, and a little bit of history too. You know, I've got a question for you. If you're driving along in your vehicle and you come to a fence and there's a gate there, who would get out and open that gate? You? Or would it be your wife? You know, sometimes in the ranch business, that has become a kind of an issue. And we'll have to sort it out the Texas way. Come along, let's get in the saddle and get on down the road. Just to let you know where we're at here, we're going to talk mainly about that King Ranch down in southern Texas. And I just want to tell you a little bit about a ranch up in the panhandle of Texas called the Matador that has a Canadian connection. Texas is rodeo country. Rodeo events are usually judged by time, like the ladies' barrel racing, or the 8 seconds to stay aboard a bucking horse, or the time it takes to rope and tie down a calf. Modern-day rodeo events evolved from older and more established similar events in Mexico. The Mexican rodeo is called a charreria. In the Mexican charreria, events are not based so much by time, but more by the judgment of skill and eloquence with rope and horse. The local little creek called Santa Gertrudis was also the name of one of the early ranches in South Texas. It became the King Ranch, and I recall as a kid the King Ranch of Texas being the biggest ranch in the world in terms of number of cattle. The Gang Ranch of central British Columbia in Canada was regarded then as the biggest ranch in the world in terms of size or acreage. Both ranches, old cowboys spent their working lives on the ranch, quitting only when they got too old to ride a horse or do ranch work, and eventually passed on, like we all will someday, over that great divide into cowboy heaven. The Texas Longhorn cattle were descendants brought over by the Spanish when they first came into this area. These Longhorn cattle were very good in the old days. They were able to resist the drought and sparse feeding conditions. Their value, however, declined as fences and concentrated ranching became more common. These guys here, this is a bull, of course, and they are the modern Santa Gertrudis cattle today. Santa Gertrudis was the name of the original Spanish land grant. 25-year-old Richard King purchased the land in the early 1850s, and the name gradually changed from Rancho de Santa Gertrudis to the King Ranch. Every once in a while you do run across these old-style wooden zigzag fences, but they were replaced by that new invention called barbed wire. The ranch got into raising world-class racehorses, and they won the Kentucky Derby and other races of the Triple Crown of horse racing. When their champion horse died, the horse was buried at home with honor in its ranch homeland. Anyone who has been around livestock knows that it's a real effort and nuisance to jump out of your truck all the time to open and close gates. The King Ranch invented this pivot-type gate that rotated. Just eased your truck up to the right-hand side of the gate and bumped it. The gate rotated and you drove on through. Then the gate finished rotating to a closed position again. It was an undoubtable winner. The question of who should open the gate often comes up when you're riding with your wife and you come up to this fence line with a closed gate. Well, I'm driving the truck, so I'm thinking that she should get out and open up the gate, and I drive through, and then she can close the gate. Now, she used to do that in the younger days, but she hasn't done that for quite some time now. She says that she's got smarter. But I have seen people really get into a battle over this. Sometimes they'll sit in front of a gate for a half hour to an hour. Both one too stubborn to get out and open the gate. I know a woman who finally jumped out of the truck and slammed the door shut and walked home and left her husband to sit there. If he didn't want to open the gate, then he could stay there. So it's a real battle. Texas solved a big problem with their Texas gates, now in common use everywhere. They dig a trench and put metal bars over it. Then you can drive your vehicle over it or bike over it, but the livestock can't get over it. It's a real deal. No more opening or closing gates. Just before we leave this ranching topic, I'd like to tell you a little bit about a ranch called the Matador Ranch. I used to drive the countryside in southern Saskatchewan quite a bit, and I came across these signs on the road every once in a while. Matador Road, Matador Cattle Co-op, and things like that. And I got wondering, why would that Spanish word matador be up here way in the far north in Saskatchewan? Well, I asked around a little bit and found out that Matador was the name of a big cattle company out of headquartered in Denver, Colorado. And they ran cattle from Brazil in the south, in South America, all the way north up into Canada. They leased land in different places. And in Canada, they could drive their cattle from North Dakota every spring northward across the Canadian border into Saskatchewan, and they could put more beef and weight on the cattle by doing that than they could compared to leaving the cattle back home in North Dakota. Because this land up here is rich, rich land in Saskatchewan. It grew the grass that millions of buffalo ate. And then when the buffalo were all killed off by the white man brought in cattle. And now these days, the cattle has changed over to big farm country. Great growing, grain growing. It's just great soil all around. And anyway, that is the basis for this Matador Ranch. On the way home through the Panhandle, we accidentally came upon this gate that was the road into the Matador Ranch. Now, the connection with the words Matador I had run across in faraway Saskatchewan in Canada had come full circle for me. It's not only cattle, but sheep as well are part of Texas history. Sheep raising first occurred with the early Spanish missions and expanded into a profitable sheep ranching operation by the 1800s. In those pioneer days, thousands of sheep were raised in this area. One herder alone lived full-time with herds of sheep, and he could look after about 1,500 sheep. Eventually, the Spanish and Mexican cowboys, or vaqueros, as they were called, who tended the sheep, gradually lost out to the Anglo-Texan ranchers who favored cattle over the sheep. Texas is cotton country. Early Native Americans grew and used cotton long before the Spanish arrived. The crop likes tropical conditions and does poorly in prolonged periods of dry and wet spells. Cotton grows best in sandy loam soil like this. The enemy is erosion caused by rain and high winds, so the farmers plant rye as a cover crop. It has deep roots that hold down the soil. Then the rye is flattened to make way to plant the cotton seeds. In past years, too much continual planting has depleted the soil of its nutrients, and heavy use of pesticides and fertilizers has deteriorated both soil and water quality. The answer has been to practice crop rotation. This is a cotton bale wagon in the off-season filled with junk, but they fill up these wagons with bales of cotton during the harvest season. Texas grows over 40% of all U.S. cotton, which is more than double that of any other state. In the world, only China and India grow more cotton than the U.S. The U.S.A. is a top exporter of cotton bales like this one, and they go to mainly Bangladesh and Central American countries, where the cotton is a basis for textile manufacturing that makes clothing and blankets. Before we leave this part of Texas, I just wanted to tell you that this was the area where the Texans and Mexico battled it out. And it eventually ended up with Texas gaining independence from Mexico and becoming an independent republic for a while before it eventually joined the United States as a state. Prior to the revolution between Texas against Mexico, the area was referred to as Tejas. And after the Anglo-Texans took over, Tejas was the forerunner of the word Texas. And you can see where this arrow here, Mexico owned all of this area. San Francisco is over to the left here. So that's how far north we were. In the area had been called New Spain, Nuevo, or New Mexico. Those terms describe this area. And it was a lonely frontier area that Mexico knew little about and had little control over. So they did not mind. They almost invited the many white Anglos from the eastern part of the continent on what was now called the United States. They encouraged Americans to pour into this area and help settle the area and get better control of it. They didn't, Mexico did not realize that so many thousands and thousands of Americans poured westward and into the Texas area, and the numbers created the seeds for problems later on, and eventually Texas revolted against the Mexican ownership. In the Texas revolt against Mexico, Sam Houston was the leader of the Texan army, and Santa Anna was the military general who was the head of the Mexican army. Now, there were three main battles in this revolution, and they happened in this order, 1, 2, and 3. The first one was at Goliad, and it was won by the Mexicans, Santa Anna's army, as he won the second one at the Alamo. And of the two battles, the Goliad battle was a far more significant one. It was larger, more people were killed, and it was a more significant battle. We've already told you about the Alamo in another travelogue on Texas in this area here. So I'll just mention a little bit more about Goliad, in which the Mexican military won. So Mexico and Santa Anna had won number 1 and number 2. He then kept his army marching toward Sam Houston and the remaining Texas insurgents. And he met up with Sam Houston and the Texans along the banks of a little river called the San Jacinto. And at the San Jacinto, Sam Houston turned the tables on Santa Anna, surprised him and defeated him and captured him. And the result of San Jacinto was that Texas declared its independence and became an independent republic separate from Mexico. In the first battle, which was at Goliad, Santa Anna's army overpowered the Texans, and Texan prisoners were held inside their own fallen fortress. Mexico regarded Texas as being its country and saw the Texans as revolutionaries and traitors. Therefore, Santa Anna ordered the execution of all Texas prisoners at Goliad. The Texas prisoners were escorted in groups of a half a dozen or so each morning to stand inside the fortress wall here, where they were executed by firing squad. About 350 Texans were executed, which gave impetus to seek revenge for Goliad later during the final battle, which was over near Houston today. The Texans in that final battle charged the Mexican army with the battle cries of "Remember the Alamo, remember Goliad." Well, neighbor, how did you all like that travelogue? Hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up, and we're going to go through some more of Texas. This is I Go Travel with Don Barnett. Adios, amigos.